Let's spend some time with Orlando Sentinel movie critic Roger Moore at the movies.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Good production quality, guys.
Frankly, my dear, on Open Mic.
It's that time once again. Time to go to the movies with Roger Moore from the Orlando Sentinel here on Open Mic.
Got my popcorn right here, ready for Roger, the best movie critic in the business. You can read his wildly popular Frankly, My Dear blog at orlandosentinel.com. You can read his movie reviews every week in the newspaper. Raj, how you doing? How you like your new theme music?
I love that. I'm just relieved that you guys didn't run the second half of that lingerie bowl interview that I know you were going to run in this spot today.
Hey, hard-hitting
45 minutes on the phone with that lady?
Something like that. I mean,
Not nearly enough time, Raj.
Yeah. We were painting a picture for the entire audience.
She wasn't happy when I told her I would run roughshod through her little team. Raj, before we get started on what's going on currently in the movies, I was thinking the other day, I was reading something about Jaws, all right? Has there ever been a movie that did more damage to recreational beachgoers than that movie?
God, I can't think of any. You know, I have young kids, and that's one I haven't shown them yet. I made the mistake the other week of letting them see Poltergeist, and one of them has not slept a good night, a full night's sleep since. So, but yeah, Jaws directly impacted beach going at the time, and I'm not sure if anything since has done the same thing to that. I mean, there's been movies about places you go and get mauled by bears, or places you go and get chewed up by bees, but they don't have quite the same sting to them.
I remember when I was a kid, Raj, and you probably remember this. We never even thought about sharks when we went to the beach.
No, not even. You know, and you don't see them that often, even if you're in Florida. I think I have a boat on the coast, and I've seen exactly one in the 10, 12 years that I've lived in Florida. So it's not like you see them all the time. You can see them up at New Smyrna Beach, and you know, if you swim up there, you're gonna, you know, the chances are that more likely there that you're going to get hit by a shark than just about anywhere else in the world, because they're so the way the coast is and everything like that we write about in the paper all the time. But no, I can't think of a movie that really chills people about a particular creature and a particular activity worse than Jaws.
Not even Piranhas 3D?
No, you know, there's not a lot of piranhas in Florida.
What was that other troubling movie where the divers got caught out? Open Water.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that one?
Yeah, if that one had been a bigger hit, the dive industry would have died. That one was as chilling as it gets. I mean, it's two people who were on a dive boat in the third world, you know, somewhere in Latin America, probably Belize, I think it was. It was originally set, and they go offshore, and the boat forgets them. And this happens occasionally. I mean, it happens. It's happened in Florida. People have been left out. You know, the boat goes back. It thinks it has a head count, and it doesn't. So, you know, this is if that movie had been a bigger hit, I think that sport diving would have taken a huge, huge hit.
Raj, when you do a movie review, do you ever watch a movie multiple times before you review it?
Occasionally. Sometimes I see one like a month in advance. Like I saw one last night that's not opening for another month, and I'll probably see it a second time just to make sure. I mean, sometimes you're doing it because you're interviewing people in it and you're watching it for one particular thing, their performance and what they were thinking and the questions you want to ask them or ask the filmmaker. And then another time you're just sitting there and trying to sort of absorb what it's trying to do and react the way they're expecting you to react when the movie comes out.
Roger, what does the Super Bowl weekend, Super Bowl Sunday do to the movie industry?
Oh, it's a big hit. It's one of the bigger hits. You know, the blizzards haven't been doing the movie business a whole lot of good, and the fact that there isn't an Avatar this year, attendance is pretty far down from last year, and last year wasn't great either because Avatar, you know, was only in theaters through March. So when you don't have a gargantuan hit like that that's pulling everybody in, people who are not even regular moviegoers, the theaters don't have a whole lot of luck pulling people in. I mean, there's worthy movies out there. There's decent program material pretty much every weekend. You know, a decent sort of thriller this weekend, a decent horror movie last weekend. But people don't necessarily know about it and think about going unless there's a movie that everybody's talking about, and they haven't had that since Avatar.
He is Roger Moore, movie critic for the Orlando Sentinel. Roger, am I wrong? Am I a simpleton in that I'm looking forward to the Kung Fu Panda commercial on the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I posted it on my blog yesterday, and it's cute, but it's.
I love that little bear.
Yeah, that's Jack Black is turning into the new Mike Myers, I think. Mike Myers kind of his career kind of wound itself down into the point where he was doing nothing but hit Shrek movies, and he couldn't get anything else made, or at least he didn't try to get anything else made outside of it. His audience appeal disappeared outside of those movies, and his career's basically over right now. And Jack Black could be headed that way too. I mean, his last movie, Gulliver's Travels, bombed.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a couple of other things in the can, but he hasn't had a hit in a while. But the Kung Fu Panda movies are huge, and he's really funny in them.
Talk about some other movies that looks like they're finally going to be made. Tell me, what are you hearing about Fletch movies? Because it looks like, I guess, a studio is finally going to do something and revive the Fletch series?
Yeah, Warner Brothers has gotten its hands on the property now. This is the series that Chevy Chase made famous back, 20 years ago or something like that?
Is Chevy going to be in them?
No, Chevy's not going to be in them.
Oh.
He wishes he could be in them.
They've been talking about this for years and years and years because people finally remember that movie, and I think they have connections to a lot of Chevy Chase's material in the 80s, and that movie was one of his more adult comedies. And there was a while there where Zach Braff from the TV show Scrubs was signed up to be him, and the guy who produced Scrubs was going to produce the film, actually going to direct it, Bill Lawrence. And that fell apart. Zach Braff dilly-dally there. You don't dither when you're hot. He was hot after the movie Garden State came out. Scrubs was never a big hit. It was a good show, but never a big hit. And he dithered so much that they didn't get the film in the pipeline and underway. And that didn't happen, and now we don't know who will play Fletch, but Warner Brothers has gotten its hands on it, and that usually means, well, they're a big deal studio. They're actually going to make sure they run through the pipeline.
Roger, what are your thoughts on Chevy Chase? Where does he fit in the pantheon of comic actors?
He's never one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Among the Saturday Night Live people, he was the first to leave. His first movie was probably his best. That was Foul Play. And he got lazy and just turned buffoonish later in his career. Just a lot of what Tim Allen you saw happen to Tim Allen happened to Chevy Chase. Although Tim Allen's had a much better career than Chevy Chase, he's done a lot more different things. But he was too willing to play in very childish movies aimed at children, and I never was a huge fan. And from what I understand, he's one of the more unpleasant people in Hollywood. So a lot of people were rooting for his TV talk show to fail, and when it did, there was much celebration, and we haven't heard a whole lot from him ever since.
That's what I was going to say. What is his reputation now? Because obviously he's got a bit role on 30 Rock, but he hadn't done much there for years, and it seemed like a lot of people just did not want to work with Chevy Chase.
Yeah, he's had bit parts in movies that were pretty good, and he's done reasonably well, playing sort of comic authority figures, but I haven't seen a whole lot of him in the last few years, and, he's not necessarily missed. Bill Murray, on the other hand, he's had that much broader appeal, and he's kind of entered the culture as somebody, as sort of this positive figure who's a figure of myth in a lot of ways. You might have heard he was at the Bears playoff game the other week, and just in the stands like everybody else, all bundled up with his face sticking out of the hoodie, and he's one of these Bill Murray stories where he gets in it with a Packers fan and starts talking about dissing Ray Nitschke because the guy was wearing a Ray Nitschke shirt, and people say he always finishes it with "No one will ever believe you." Because Google him on the internet, Bill Murray, and no one will ever believe you, and you'll find all these stories of him being in a tree outside of somebody's dorm room, or him singing karaoke at some little dive in the middle of nowhere, and he finishes the story he leaves with saying, "No one will ever believe you."
Oh.
I'm sure you know the story. Can you tell the story? You probably know this about the way that Bill Murray has people get in touch with him, because he doesn't have an agent, does he?
No, he doesn't. You got to go through some elaborate rigmarole. I can't remember what it is.
You got to call a 1-800 number.
He doesn't do a lot of interviews either, and people, he's verified this. I mean, you've got to leave an answering machine message somewhere, I think, and then he'll, if he's intrigued by it, he'll get back to you. And getting to that answering machine is probably the biggest hoop you have to jump through. So he's not necessarily an easy person to get for your movie, but he does, he works a lot. So he works in a lot in little tiny movies, like the last one he did was Get Low, which came out last summer and made like $3 million, and he was wonderful in it.
Roger, obviously, I mean, you know a lot about the movies, but you're sort of a pop culture guy too. What does the Super Bowl mean to you, to America? What are you a Super Bowl guy?
I haven't watched it since the Steelers stole it from the Seahawks in 2006, I think it was.
Yep.
A game that if America's sports writers were better, you would have found out who fixed it, because that game was fixed. I saw the 72 Olympic basketball final. I saw Muhammad Ali's fights in the late 70s. I know what fix looks like. That game was fixed. Okay, so it's not a big deal to me, and I'm usually doing something else on Super Bowl. Although I've been to Super Bowl parties and occasionally will watch a little bit of the game, but it's one of the few last benchmarks, I think, with those things that gather the whole country around one event. And that's why it still has a great cultural significance. Although we've got a lot more choices now, and if you don't want to watch it, there are a whole lot of ways to avoid watching it.
Also, I saw in your blog, Frankly, My Dear, they're remaking soap operas now in the movies.
You remember Dark Shadows, right?
Is that is that the one with the vampire?
Yeah, Barnabas Collins. What was the guy's name? Jonathan. I can't remember his name. Jonathan. I want to say Frakes, but that's the guy from Star Trek, isn't it? Anyway, yeah, it's the soap opera about Barnabas Collins and the folks who inhabit Collinwood, and they're vampires, and they're people who are not vampires, and the deserving live, and the undeserving are bitten on the neck. And it's being remade with Tim Burton in charge, so it means it'll probably be scary and kind of funny. And Johnny Depp is supposedly his Barnabas Collins. They just cast Jackie Earle Haley. They've got a couple of other people in mind to do it. It's all about branding this day and age. I mean, even sports writers branding their radio shows and getting their brand name out there. Even if you never saw the show yourself, you know what Dark Shadows means. Even if you never saw Starsky and Hutch, you know remember what that meant, and the movie thus is sort of pre-sold to people. They have a familiarity with it that gets their interest up a little bit, and their awareness is what leads to ticket sales. So that's why Barnabas Collins and Dark Shadows is worth remaking. That's why people are talking about Fletch, because people remember Fletch. That's why any movie is remade.
Was Dark Shadows, was that a short-lived soap opera?
No, it was on in the 60s and early 70s, and then they tried it again in the 90s, and it didn't work. This was before the whole vampire revival of Twilight and the stuff around Twilight that happened like in the last 10 years. But, yeah, it's been around for a long time. It was on for a good while, and it was something you watched when you got home from school if you were a kid in the 60s and 70s.
Roger, I love adventure movies. As you can tell, I'm an adventurous guy.
Yeah.
Sanctum. I'm intrigued by Sanctum, the cave movie.
It's not bad. It's the best movie opening this weekend, and if you're going to skip the Super Bowl, it's kind of worth skipping the Super Bowl for.
Ooh.
But probably not. You'll probably go Saturday. You'll probably maybe go to it before the 5.5-hour pregame show or something. But it's an Australian film that was produced by James Cameron. One of his buddies, one of the people who this adventurer diver who he works with on some of his documentaries about shipwrecks and things like that, Titanic and other shipwrecks that he's visited. I think his name is Andrew White. He's an Australian, and he had this mishap years ago where he was trapped with a bunch of people in a cave that started flooding during a storm, and that's what this is based on, his story. And it's they changed the names, and it's totally fictionalized, but it's Cameron sort of trying out all this 3D underwater gear that he's got that he's going to use in the next Avatar movie, the sequels he's going to do. And it's this, it's beautiful looking movie about people trapped below ground, miles below ground, when a cave is flooded during a hurricane, and the caves are in Papua New Guinea, which is the island just north of Australia. And a bunch of no-name people, as I say, are trapped in the cave, and it's sort of that 10 Little Indians Agatha Christie storyline: who will live, who will die next. And it's really good-looking movie, which is, I think, the main thing about it, and a decent enough adventure. It's sort of an old-school B-movie.
He is Roger Moore, Orlando Sentinel movie critic, and the man who once personally interviewed Jimmy Buffett. Roger, thanks for joining us today. You want to give us another Buffett lyric this week or not?
Yeah, I think I'll pass.
Thanks, Rog.